Let me ask you this. I'm going to jump in here and just throw this question at you. What courts do we have to follow? Why do some people cite U.S. District Court as binding? What parts of the country require us to follow that? Who makes the decisions on what's persuasive and what's binding? And, that's probably where that's a good question. People often cite things, for example, in New Jersey, we don't follow anything out of our district court. We just, it's never cited. It's never followed. Yeah, from federal court, right. So we don't have district court. So when I say federal court, we have an appellate division. We have a U.S. Supreme Court, a New Jersey Supreme Court division here for our higher divisions of court. And then we're in a district. What are we, third district? First district?
I think you're in the third.
Yeah, I think we're in the third.
Circuit.
Third Circuit. So you have the U.S. District Court, U.S. District Court of Appeals, and then obviously the top of the chain is going to be the U.S. Supreme Court, which applies to everybody. So maybe you can help all of us understand that.
Excellent question. I get this one all the time too. So if we're talking about the federal Constitution, let's go that route first. So the Fourth Amendment or the Fifth Amendment. The U.S. Supreme Court, obviously, that's the top. Okay, anything that they say regarding the Fourth Amendment, the protections that it affords, or what police officers can and can't do, that's binding on every single court nationwide across the country. And then the court right below the U.S. Supreme Court are your federal circuit courts of appeals. There's 11 circuits plus the District of Columbia Circuit. This is where it varies from state to state. So I'll set that aside just for a second. You have your federal circuit courts of appeals, and then your lower court is your federal district court. That's your trial courts. Every state has numerous district, well, most states have numerous district courts. All right, so you got your federal circuits, which comprise multiple states. So like you said, New Jersey is in, I think, the Third Circuit. I think that's Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey. I think that might be it. So we're in the Fourth Circuit here in Virginia. Then you have your state courts. Every state has trial courts. They have at least one appellate level court. Some of your smaller population states only have a Supreme Court. Most states have a mid-level appellate court as well. They can decide federal issues, and they can also decide state issues. Now, your state Supreme Court, or whatever your highest level court is in your state, that's the final say on your state constitutional issues. The U.S. Supreme Court cannot overrule. What was the Pennsylvania case that came out recently that limited the automobile exception? I forget the name of it, but it was the big one on the group. Mm-hmm. That one limited the automobile exception in Pennsylvania. Well, I got many questions. Well, can't the U.S. Supreme Court overturn that? No. It was decided under the Pennsylvania state constitution. Their search and seizure provision of their constitution is more restrictive than the Fourth Amendment. So that's the end of the line, is the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Now, if that provision was somehow unconstitutional under the Fourth Amendment, then it could be overruled, but it's not, because it provides more protection. Mm-hmm. Federal circuit courts of appeals, the one step below the U.S. Supreme Court. Most state courts, like your state Supreme Court or your appellate court, they consider the federal circuit courts non-binding on them. Meaning, just because the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals decides the Fourth Amendment issue, say, and of course it's going to be in a federal case, it's not binding on Virginia Supreme Court or the Virginia Appellate Court. However, most states, including Virginia, they're highly deferential to those cases, so those courts. So they will look at an opinion from the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, and if the issue is very similar to what we're trying to figure out here in Virginia, they're going to give a lot of deference to their decision and are very likely to rule consistent with that. Now, they're free to rule differently on this Fourth Amendment issue, but they're very likely to rule. They're highly persuasive, I should say. There's a handful of states that have held through their own state courts that they're binding. I think Alabama or Mississippi, one of those two I know, has held, their Supreme Court says whatever I think it's the Sixth Circuit, Fifth or Sixth, I can't remember. Whatever they say, it's binding on our courts.
Oh, and that's a principle.
Yeah, as a matter of
law.
Law. Yep. Anything that this Federal Circuit Court of Appeals says on this particular issue, we're going to follow it here. It's binding on us. It may as well have come from the Supreme Court, is basically what they're saying. And then there's a few that just consider it just persuasive. They're free to interpret their own way. But I consider the federal courts of appeals, the circuit courts of appeals, very significant sources of constitutional law. The vast majority of your Fourth Amendment cases are decided actually in your circuit courts of appeals, definitely not the U.S. Supreme Court.
Could you rely on some of those? Like, let's say if we had an area, could we rely on what the courts have said, even outside of our circuit courts?
Sure, they would be considered persuasive. So in Virginia, anything outside of the Fourth, we're going to give high deference to the Fourth Circuit. But if the Third Circuit up there in your area decided a similar issue, maybe the Fourth Circuit hasn't addressed it, but the Third Circuit has. And it would be considered persuasive. It's not going to be binding. We don't give it that same level of deference. But it would certainly be a case, if I was a prosecutor, I would certainly cite that if I don't have anything in our Fourth Circuit. We're going to look to the Fourth Circuit first.
Mm-hmm. And why do some states, when they rule or when there's an argument made, are they looking in other states or at other courts? You'll see sometimes maybe in Texas, they're citing case law in New Hampshire. Is that because the topic hasn't been discussed anywhere else? They're kind of going over, well, they heard that there. Let's see what they said.
Exactly. We have never had this particular issue come before us here in Texas, for example. There's nothing from the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court. There's nothing maybe from the circuit that we're in. So let's go and look at other states and see how they have decided it. And so they'll collect the cases from the other states that have decided the issue, looking at their analysis of the issue and try and figure out, well, we think this is more persuasive than the other. They certainly aren't binding on any state courts are not binding on anything outside of their own state. But yeah, they frequently do look to other states if it's a first impression case in their particular state.
Cool. I mean, this is good. It's good stuff. People are often confused